Well, thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, everyone. Lauren and I are thrilled to be here setting the stage. Though we must admit, the idea of open mic night caught us a little bit off guard. When Jim first mentioned it to us, our first thought was a little something like this.
Lavacoid. A lavacoid. Oh my god.
Stop the clock. Okay. He's all right. Yeah, okay.
ALOPECOID. A lavacoid.
That is correct.
Well, two takeaways that we want to leave you with from this clip. The first is that if you see either one of us go down over the next 15 minutes, we only ask that you give us a chance to get up and nail it, like our spelling bee friend did. But secondly, this young man reminds us that consistency and perseverance is always a winning combination, and you'll see that theme referenced throughout our presentation. That being said, we're excited to highlight some of the main real estate trends of 2017, peppering in some predictions for 2018, and overall setting the stage for our panel of esteemed colleagues and keynote speaker, Jack Brennan. With Boston being on such a hot streak, I'd like to pass it off to Lauren to kick things off.
Thanks, Bill. Boston has seen record high transaction volume over the past several years, and 2017 was no exception. At least 25% of transactions and ongoing demand in the Boston marketplace is fueled by tenants looking to relocate from the suburbs or out of state and into Boston. There are many examples of this, and we have included a few notable ones for your review. So, why are companies continuing to flock to Boston? There are several reasons for this, one of which is the war for talent. Many companies who are looking to hire talent find in some cases it's easier to do so with a Boston address. Unemployment in Massachusetts is 3.6%, which is below the national average of 4.1%. The last time the unemployment rate was sub 5% was in 2007. Hiring good talent has become increasingly challenging, taking on average 22% longer to fill a position than it did in 2007. Another reason companies are moving to the city is because they want to be located in a vibrant ecosystem of like-minded companies. Firms want to operate in close proximity to their peers, which is why we see these clusters, like the life science cluster in Kendall Square and tech clusters in Downtown Crossing and Seaport forming. The third reason is millennials, my generation, which might be the most studied generation of all time. The millennial workforce will comprise of more than 33% of adult Americans by 2020 and a staggering 75% of the global workforce by 2025. They want to be engaged and are focused on their experiences, building communities and teamwork. Over 250,000 called Boston home in 2015. Having access to public transit, quality retail, museums, sports arenas, and parks are all part of what keeps millennials in Boston.
Lauren makes a great point, and we're all reading the same headlines regarding the large fundamental transition of companies moving from the suburbs to Boston. But don't be mistaken, the suburbs, and hopefully my job security, are alive and well. During the fourth quarter of 2017, for the first time in history, we recorded 100 million square feet of occupancy, just about twice that of the Back Bay, Financial District, and Seaport markets combined. Now, I'm not going to say that companies are going to stop looking to relocate to urban markets. However, in our opinion, the headline deals are the exception and not the rule. Lauren talked a lot about millennials, and we're certainly seeing companies and buildings in the suburbs cater to this generation, more so than even 12 months ago. However, the suburbs represent all generations. It's millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, and the latest group to begin the workforce, Gen Z. In fact, a recent article in Curbed Boston indicated that in 2016, the number of millennials in the city of Boston was down by 7,000. This was the first decline we've seen since 2010. If such a trend continues, perhaps as a result of the millennials maturing and starting families, the suburbs should be well positioned to capture the attention of this demographic, who will increasingly be entering leadership positions within the workforce. So whether it's proximity to the employee base, the disruption, office space costs, school systems, or simply the cost of parking, which as an aside in the city of Boston is equivalent to roughly 1 month's salary of the typical suburban employee. For these reasons alone, we believe we're going to continue to see companies like Simpson Gumpert's, Mimecast, Tesaro, and many others, both large and small, test the waters of urban relocation. However, most will ultimately decide to keep the majority of their people in the suburbs. We do expect, however, to continue to see larger companies try to have their cake and eat it too by looking to have a Boston outpost, like SGH or Red Hat, who's a global software company that ultimately decided to keep the majority of their people in Westford and open a small office in the Fort Point for an executive briefing center. One instance where we're actually seeing reverse migration would be in the life science industry, where the lack of lab supply in Cambridge has forced tenants like 24M, Genosha, Addgene, and C4 Therapeutics to look beyond the Cambridge zip codes into towns like Lexington, Bedford, Waltham, and Watertown. This trend, which you may hear more from my colleague Evan Gallagher later on, is certainly here to stay. In addition to these life science organizations, there are many companies currently residing in the suburbs that are actively looking for space. Several are listed behind me, and there are many others as well. However, you might ask, okay, this is great information, but what can I take from it? Well, there are two things that we want to leave you with. The first is flight to quality, with tenants looking for urban and suburban. While it's unclear where these tenants will end up, each has expressed interest within the market that building amenities and nearby amenities are an important aspect as they think about recruitment and retention. While moving to Boston may be the exception and not the rule, as I mentioned earlier, creating an environment with urban conveniences and allure is a very real demand. The second takeaway we want to leave you with is growth. Many active tenants in the marketplace today are growing either organically or through acquisition. Growth and flight to quality are especially evident when looking at a few of the transactions from 2017. To name just a few, CA Technologies relocated from Framingham to be in an amenity-rich environment of Burlington. SGH opted for a built-to-suit adjacent to new retail in Waltham. Astellas Pharmaceuticals expanded significantly and relocated to Westboro. And Tesaro, now occupying close to 250,000 square feet, expanded once again within Waltham's Bay Colony. It feels like almost every active tenant we see in the marketplace wants recently renovated buildings with all the bells and whistles. Having just a cafe or a fitness center is no longer wowing today's tenant. They want both of these and more. They want the common conference room, the game room, the lounges, the EV charging stations, genius bars, and they're taking a hard look at what's beyond the four walls of the office building to see what the surrounding area offers as well. To employees, conveniences are key. One convenience in the suburbs that seems significantly underutilized by the average tenant in comparison to the buzz that's generated anyway is public transportation. Unless you're walking distance to the Red Line, generally speaking, we're not seeing public transportation impact the average suburban tenant. For those of us that spend a lot of time in our cars, it's easy to see as traffic is a consistent topic of conversation amongst our clients. Well, maybe it's the Uber effect, maybe it's texting and driving, or it could just be job growth. Greater Boston has recorded 170,000 jobs above the previous record high. And perhaps we'll be talking about driverless cars at next year's seminar and how great of an impact they've had on reducing the number of vehicles on the road. But for now, traffic is here to stay.
I agree with you, Bill. But even though traffic is a very real issue getting in and around Boston, it is not scaring companies away. We have seen record high demand over the past 2 years with over 6 million square feet of tenants actively looking for space today in Boston. TAMI companies, technology, advertising, media, and information are driving demand and growth in the urban markets, making up at least 30% of our demand. Whether it's e-commerce giants like Wayfair or Amazon, who's looking for an additional 1 million square feet in the seaport, cybersecurity, music, or bike sharing, many companies are looking to grow their footprints and headcounts in Boston. Traditional firms remain active also and are finding ways to shrink their footprint while keeping the headcount the same or hiring. A good example of this is our client, Mintz Levin, and their recent renewal at One Financial Center, where they went from 258,000 square feet to 205,000 square feet while keeping the same headcount. Cambridge remains in hyper-growth mode as early-stage biotech companies coming out of stealth mode are gobbling up space. But not to be overlooked is Big Pharma, which continues to acquire companies and expand within Cambridge. Another trend we are seeing and anticipate will definitely continue is office tenants entering the market with compressed timelines, making co-working and spec suite options even more attractive. Many landlords like Boston Properties, Equity Office, Oxford, Synergy Investments, and more have had great success with leasing up spec suites. One recent success story is Oxford's completion of the entire 8th floor at 60 State Street, roughly 25,000 square feet. Once the build-out was complete, the first tenant who toured the space, who was from out of market, signed a letter of intent within a few days, signed a license agreement overnight, moved in within 7 days, and paid $11 over Oxford's original underwriting. Another sector that's having significant impact on urban demand is co-working. WeWork continues to grow around the globe, opening 90 new locations last year and planning for an unprecedented 1 million square feet of expansion per month in 2018. Locally, WeWork already occupies 6 Cambridge and Boston locations and is actively negotiating for another 3 to 4, doubling its footprint. And while it certainly is the most sizable, WeWork is by no means alone in the co-working game. 2017 saw both growth and entry of several other co-working concepts, a trend we have full confidence will continue into 2018 and beyond. And contrary to the stereotype you probably have in your mind, sneaker-wearing, foosball-playing, avocado toast-eating individuals, the co-working candidate is not nearly so black and white. Liberty Mutual in the Back Bay, for instance, leases WeWork space at 31 St. James. And it is not as a relief valve due to space constraints. It's because their people like working there. Surprisingly, almost 30% of WeWork's members comes from sophisticated enterprise companies who employ over 1,000 people, a segment they have made clear is a huge target for their future growth. Whereas landlords used to exercise caution in leasing to co-working companies, the sector has clearly established its credibility and is here to stay, something you'll hear more about from our first panel.
We've yet to see WeWork enter the suburban market. However, as we've seen in years past, some landlords have developed their own version by leasing out individual offices within larger spaces without any services. In some instances, this has actually generated higher dollars than if the suite was leased in its entirety to one company, essentially the pieces being worth more than the whole. On the topic of rents, the suburbs have seen an uptick over the last 12 months, with Class A and Class B properties at the highest level we've seen in 15 years. Class A rents along 128 are now well into the $40 per square foot range. Comparably speaking, Class A rents along 495 are back into the low to mid 20 per square foot range, which coincidentally is about where they were 20 years ago. The reason that we've seen rents rise along 128 is the fact that there's a limited supply of Class A options, and this has allowed the Class B market to draft off of its success. When looking at the flex and industrial rents, the same can be said. You may hear more about this from my colleague, Caleb Hudak, but there's a limited number of quality buildings in the marketplace today, which is pushing rents up in this segment. When talking about rents, the most common question we hear is, have we reached the peak, or are rents going to continue to go up? In my opinion, we're going to see rents plateau in 2018 within the suburbs. Despite the fact that there are a limited number of Class A options, there are still several buildings in the marketplace for active tenants. In fact, we're tracking 37 existing buildings in the suburbs that can accommodate 100,000 square feet or more. This is why we're most likely not going to see any spec buildings built either. At a vacancy rate approaching 18% and construction costs continuing to rise without an extremely low basis, the economics just don't make sense. In some instances, we may start to see landlords scale back on the amount of TI as a way to improve their position, but as I said, we do expect rents to remain fairly flat over the next 12 months. Finally, however, we do expect brokerage commissions to increase twofold over the next 6 months. The number of summer home purchases and country club memberships in the brokerage community are down 25%, so we expect big changes in 2018. I have to be honest, I thought I'd get a few more laughs than that. Thank you. My wife didn't get it when I explained it to her 3 times, so I should have known that was a sign. So that it doesn't get any more awkward than this, I'll pass it back to Lauren.
We are seeing record high rents in the Class A and B markets in nearly every submarket in Boston. Class B rents have increased more this cycle than Class A, up over 55% since 2010, whereas Class A is up 32%. The increase in rents, in addition to the 6 to 8% annual increase in construction costs, is putting pressure on tenants who have upcoming lease expiration dates, and is contributing to tenants' reduction in size. Landlords are recognizing the tightening of the market, and in some quality Class A buildings, with multiple tenants vying for the same space, revised proposals from landlords are coming back with rents higher than their initial proposal, which is something we have not seen since the last peak in 2007. Average rents in the Seaport are up 88% since 2011, and Back Bay is breaking records with rents reaching high 80s per square foot gross in some of the tops of the towers, like 200 Clarendon Street, which saw over 400,000 square feet of transactions over the past 12 months. New construction rents are pushing to record heights also. Pricing at 121 Seaport, Pier 4, where our client Cengage is relocating, and Hub on Causeway achieve rents starting in the mid to high 40s triple net with $75 to $100 in tenant improvements. The next wave of development, with buildings such as WS Development's 88 Seaport Boulevard commanding even higher rents. Cambridge dwarfs these levels, with lab rents currently in the low 80s triple net, getting into the low 90s triple net for new product. Office rents are in the mid 80s gross, and new construction rates are topping $90 gross. One question we are often asked is, will we see more speculative construction? We don't think we will see the magnitude of spec construction we have seen in recent years, but there are some developers who do intend to break ground. 321 Harrison Avenue in the South End, developed by CIM in Nordblum. 2 Dry Dock Avenue, Skanska's next development, which sits at the entrance to the Marine Industrial Park. And the Withrop Square Garage, developed by Millennium Partners, currently under demolition, announced last week their intent to start the tower this summer. In 2007, the Boston investment sales market saw approximately $4.4 billion in transaction volume, which was well below 2014 and 15 levels, which were over $5.5 billion. The lack of available product, along with improving fundamentals and foreign capital's attraction to Boston, is driving pricing up. So even though overall volume was down, we are still breaking records when it comes to price. More than half of the city's Class A and B product have sold at least once this cycle, and the ownership makeup is changing. This is patient capital, with at least 50% of all sales having some form of known foreign investment stake. Time will tell, but this could help stabilize pricing in the Boston market in the event of an eventual downturn. Bill, now that we've hit on some of the trends of 2017, what are you seeing for this year?
Well, in 2018, we expect in the suburbs that more housing is going to continue to be built to create additional live, work, play environments. The success of University Station in Westwood and Founders Park in Needham are great examples of this urban and suburban success. We expect to see the lab market become more and more relevant in the suburbs. A great example of this is 266 2nd Ave in Waltham. Griffith and Rockwood proactively converted 50,000 square feet of older office space into lab ready, quickly leasing up that space and then turning it around and selling the building for over $300 a foot. On the investment sales theme, we expect activity along 128 to continue to attract large pools of investors, with one of the major reasons being the lack of inventory in Boston. And we expect landlords and employers alike continue to persevere, similar to our spelling bee friend from earlier. They won't settle, and they'll continue to change boundaries of what is expected in order to find the right match for their tenants and for their employees. And finally, as we've seen in years past, the consistency of the suburbs will continue. Now I'll pass it back to Lauren for her final thoughts on 2018.
We're predicting that over the next several months, we will see a jump in Class A rents in Boston. This is due to the steady demand I talked about, several large commitments, recent executed leases, and the lack of large block availabilities. And as I mentioned earlier, construction costs have seen a steady and significant increase over the past several years at 6 to 8%. We see the rate of increase slowing down but not stopping. And because of the continued increase in rent and construction costs, we're predicting tenants will start to evaluate options in the peripheral Boston and Cambridge urban core markets that have good access to public transportation, amenities, and retail. We believe tenant migration will continue, as at least 25% of active tenants in the market are currently coming from outside of Boston. Lastly, local and foreign investors will continue to want a piece of the urban market, but will remain frustrated with the lack of available product. Investors will need to be more creative with their strategy, aggressive with their capital, and evaluate the peripheral urban markets to find deals. With that, we would like to turn the podium back over to our president, Jim Alcock, to moderate the first panel. Thank you.
Thank you.